Whoops. I've got 2 tripod machines for holding this phone steady, and still I seem to lean it up against books more than anything else. Hello everyone, welcome back. It's Monday, slightly grey. I'm resisting saying it's autumn beginning here in Manchester. We had quite a sunny weekend. We had a very relaxing weekend here. Jeremy and I went to Altrincham, which is right across town, but it's got a nice town centre, on Saturday, and had a bimble about. That's the verb that my friend Rylan uses for just shuffling about shops and pleasing yourself. And we went to a favourite cafe for lunch, and Jeremy went to Tasty Records, a vinyl shop. We went to all the charity shops and bookshops and accrued a small pile of treasure. Mostly it was a weekend of watching movies. I've had this lovely thing of watching a couple of films every night and happening upon fantastic ones. The other night, I think Friday, I watched a couple of black and white films that have been on the hard drive of the Blu-ray player for a while. And I sat and watched Hangover Square, based on the Patrick Hamilton novel, which I wasn't expecting for some reason to be a kind of gruesome melodrama and murder and camp as it was, but it was fantastic. I had that, and then I had, or vice versa, before that I had Alec Guinness in Father Brown. Both these films from the kind of 40s, 50s, and both fantastic, made with such care, such kind of satisfyingly told stories, especially Hamilton Square. Both with fantastic soundtracks as well. And then Saturday night we had The French Connection, which I'd never seen all the way through. Sometimes you think you've seen films and you've just seen the highlights, or you've seen a clip or something, and you think you know what it's about and how it plays out. What a gritty and gruesome film that is. And we had a fantastic recent science fiction film as well called Save Yourselves, about a alien invasion that happens, and the 2 hipsters at the centre of the film don't even notice because they're having a digital detox and they're so busy centering themselves and being mindful they don't notice that planet Earth has been invaded. It's a very funny, silly, sarcastic movie. And then Sunday was our Fambles group meeting at Johnny and Ryland's out of town, out in the country. And we sat in the garden for our gay men's writing group, which entails about 5 or 6 hours heavy discussion, where we range over everything, and everybody had work in chapters or poems. And we had a feast and enjoyed each other's company in the sun. It was actually so sunny, we all had to wear silly hats to keep the sun off. You would never believe it today. It really feels like early September already. And today I knew I'd be straight back to work, and I've had to beam in to 4 different projects this morning, doing a little bit here and a lot there, and parachuting into different things. And I've made lists this morning. The only way I can kind of proceed with anything, is to make lists of where I'm up to with all these different things. And it turns out I'm working on 10 different projects, all at different phases of completion, delivery, early drafting, or proposing, or the first inklings of what they're going to be. But they're 10 very different projects for, I think, 7 different publishers or producers. And they're all jostling around in my head, which is crazy, isn't it? It's always like that. I do try, though, only to be writing actual words for chapters or scenes, for one of those things at a time. Of course, I'm writing words in synopses and outlines and notes on things for all the others, but in terms of kind of writing actual words on the page for a finished thing, I try to keep that on one thing at a time. But you still have to do these parachute jumps into other bits of work. Anyway, those are cleared for the day, those 3 or 4 things, and I've settled down to carry on reading this. Didn't get much reading time over the weekend, though I walked around with this the whole time. We sat in a cafe in Altrincham and I was reading Bernie Taupin's book. It's such a good book. I think I've already ranted and raved about the chapters in Paris. And since then, we've had chapters in telling us what New York was like in the 70s, telling us what it was like to be a hellraiser in LA in the 70s. And I believe every word. He's a guide, a good guide to the worlds he takes you into. And it is behind the scenes of Hollywood or the world of rock and roll at that time. John Lennon being nervous before going on stage in 1974 with Elton John on Thanksgiving at Madison Square Gardens, how nervous Lennon was and how Bernie has to just about carry him on stage. Moments like that, which have no other witness in the world. That's the value of these books. Helene Hanff says in Q's Legacy, one of her later books, that the books she loves are I was there books, not fiction. And I can kind of see it when I read something like this. And you feel that's what Bernie's telling you the whole time. I was there and I saw. And it was a very kind of circumscribed era in some way. This jet set world of rock and roll excess is very much of its time. It was a kind of innocent time in some ways. Anyway, it's very funny and very illuminating and addictive. So I've still got a chunk of this to read, but the post has just been, and brand new today is this, and I can't wait to let this skip ahead of everything else on my reading lists. It's the new Natalie Goldberg book. She's the author of Writing Down the Bones from 1986, one of the great books about creative writing practice, and something that taught me an awful lot when I first read it in my early 20s. So I've read her for more than 30 years, and I've read just about everything she's done, some of them more than once. I love looking down that list of what people have done, especially when you've got the chance of finding something you haven't read yet. I think her last book was about 5 years ago. No, I missed the book about haiku. But Let the Whole Thundering World Come Down, which was a memoir, I think was about 2018-19. This book is about losing her mojo during COVID and lockdown, I believe, or kind of regaining her mojo, which is interesting to me. I'm fascinated by what happened during that time to writers especially. I know people who were empowered by lockdown, who actually relished not having the excuse, or having the excuse not to go out and engage with the world and bury themselves in the work. I also know people who froze in panic and couldn't write. Natalie Goldberg did an online workshop at one point, a free one, during the first year of COVID, and thousands of people took part, and I did it. It was by Zoom. And mostly, she talked a bit to a young man who interviewed her. They were in 2 separate places, and he asked a few questions, and she was kind of amazed and astonished to be doing this virtual thing where she couldn't actually see the people she was talking to. She was like somebody out of a different age. And then she began the actual workshop with all these people she couldn't see. And she did it as she would normally do it, telling everybody to write. And so she sat there quietly. I don't think she wrote. I think she just closed her eyes and looked down at the desk, I think. And meanwhile, the comments down the side of the screen of people kind of, I love you, I love your work, all of that stuff was going by in hearts and stuff. When they should have been writing, I was writing, I was being good and taking part. But some people had tuned in late, and all they saw was this revered writer seemingly slumped over a desk. So lots of the comments suddenly started saying, oh my God, are you all right? Is she okay? You okay, hon? And she was just meditating or something. Or I think scribbling unseen below the level of the camera. And the young fella who'd done the interview had to pop on and say, it's fine, she's okay. She's doing a workshop. Do take part. Anyway, that made me laugh a lot. This is a kind of a short book, which, that can be excused. She's written lots. I'll read you the blurb. Best-selling author and teacher Natalie Goldberg has been writing for the past 50 years. But at the beginning of the pandemic, her imaginative wellspring suddenly dries up, and she is forced to ask herself, what do I do when what has always worked for me doesn't work anymore? In this beautifully written, inspiring personal account, Natalie shares her harrowing experience. Out of creative paralysis and back onto the page, she gets into her car and leaves New Mexico in search of a new inventive source. On her journey through the western states, she visits famous literary sites. Is this in COVID? We couldn't move around that much. Maybe it was after lockdown. I hope so. Searching for the spark that will reignite her ability to write. And next to Hemingway's grave, she finds it. Now Natalie shares her story of travelling through literary and personal memory to clarify the way forward. She discovers how to write through the emptiness in order to fill up the world with compassion, healing, and renewed liveliness. For anyone struggling to reconnect with their own creative source, Writing on Empty, good title, is a gentle and instructive guidebook back to remembering what truly matters. Gentle is good, and reminding people is good. And that means something to me, the idea of writing through the problems. That's what I always do. When faced with problems, disasters, rejections, shitty feedback, terrible notes, awkward people, all kinds of disasters, personal disasters, I find that I write my way through them to get to the other side. I write down everything I'm thinking. If there's a problem with something I'm working on and it's a knotty problem to do with plotting or something that needs to change, or the story's been derailed, I write into that as well. I try and make a gap in the text. If something's going wrong in a story, I will adopt the voice of one of the characters and write a letter to me or to one of the other characters explaining what they think is going wrong in the story. They will try and smooth down the kinks in the plot. It's an interesting tack to take, but it means you're focusing on the page and keeping going, and not just, putting it away and sulking with it, which is so easy to do. Or just, hammering out all your own thoughts and feelings on something that nobody else is ever going to see. That's something she taught me 30 odd years ago, and I've never let go of. I do every single day still, thanks to Natalie Goldberg. That bit there about getting in the car and driving off and hoping it wasn't during lockdown, is interesting. When you could go out for an hour a day, we did. I remember during the early weeks of COVID, we drove into town and stayed in the car as if we were in some kind of lethal safari park, and looked out at this empty city. And it was immaculate. There was no people there, of course. And it was the tidiest and cleanest we'd ever seen Manchester. And as the time went on, we went a little further afield. We managed a day out in the summer with friends who we still kept a distance from, when we went and found a river in a valley and bathed in it and sat in the water on a sunny day. We still sat apart from them. We were so good in obeying the rules. Now you look back and you think, I don't think everybody was. We knew they weren't at the time. We knew the government weren't at the time. They were having parties. But we were. And it was a challenge. But the idea of going out and looking for the world again, because you depend on it when you write about it. We had a day out later in the summer. We went to Yorkshire and went to Sedbergh, which is a book town with lots of bookshops. And that was when they first had perspex on everything, and behind the in front of the counters, and everybody had masks on. And it was the first bookshop I went to at that point, and found a copy of The Princess Bride in hardback, a beautiful copy, for £5. I could barely see because my mask was fogging up my glasses so badly. And then we sat in a cafe where, every other table was occupied, and there was perspex around the tables, I think. And the poor people running this cafe were so masked up. They were in proper kind of radiation suits as they brought our sandwiches, and we ordered too much food for lunch because we knew they didn't have many customers. And it was like having a picnic in space. David, in our writing group, said yesterday that he doesn't like thinking back to those couple of years of COVID. It still makes him feel ill and nervous to revisit them, even in his mind. And I find it a bit odd, a bit hard to look at my journals from those times, because they were very complete. They were kind of novel length, the stuff that I wrote then, because I thought it was important to remember exactly how all that was, to bear witness. Again, I was there. That phrase. Anyway, so I'm looking forward to this. I will finish Bernie's book, and I think that's going to be a favourite. I think that's something to return to in the future. And I'll be on to Natalie. Okay, I've talked for longer than I thought I would. I thought this was going to be a brief catch up. I hope everyone's well and the week is treating you well so far. Let me know what you're reading and what you're up to. There's no socks just now. He's had some late lunch, and he's run out. He's been extremely boisterous and noisy lately. It could be the change in seasons getting to him. Okay, goodbye, and I will see you again soon in the next episode.